We're back with a video that could be considered a spin-off to the What If the MCU was the DCCU series.
I love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now wake up! It's time to look at the enemy. Look in the mirror if he is no friend to me.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Pitch This here on the MrEliMac YouTube channel. I'm your host, MrEliMac, and today I'm finally getting to the idea of what if the X-Men films were DC films. So finally getting to that idea because of the MCU very much bringing in ideas from the X-Men films into the MCU. I felt like it was finally time for me to get this idea out there, especially with Deadpool and Wolverine coming just around the corner, and I can finally talk about what I would do with that Fox X-Men universe. And it's an idea that I don't think a lot of people are going to be expecting, because I very much for this idea didn't want to use traditional DC Comics heroes, because the way that Marvel and Fox, they've been doing it is that the X-Men exist in their own pocket universe, and sort of the MCU is where all the mainline heroes are. And that's sort of how I've been presenting it in my DCCU, as DCCU is very much the mainline characters, and this is sort of a pocket universe to everything that's been happening over here. This is existing over here in its own little universe. And I decided to go a route that might be a little different. And also, when I was trying to conceptualize it, it was very hard for me to conceptualize it since I had not read a single one of these comics. And for the X-Men Fox universe, I decided to dive into the Wildstorm comics and have sort of the Wildstorm universe be that Fox universe, because in the mainline DC Comics, Wildstorm became part of the DC universe, and that was sort of something that they had to retrofit into to make Wildstorm and Vertigo and DC fit, and that was during the New 52 age. And this is sort of me going, hey, I'm sort of going to be doing that too in the future when I have to get to that, but we're not getting to that part. I'm just doing my analog for the X-Men Fox universe, but with Wildstorm universe characters. And I also think it is a good idea to have these characters, since Wildstorm was such a big thing in the 90s, and X-Men in particular, though they were popular before the 90s, X-Men was very much promoted and treated as a bigger deal in the 1990s with the animated show and with Jim Lee and Chris Claremont with their run. Just a lot of stuff was helping X-Men in the 90s. But before I get into the idea, please be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. That way you can be up to date with all the videos I have here on the channel. Also hit the notification bell, that way you can be notified whenever a new video like this comes your way. Before I actually get into the proper, like, this is that, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you right now, I do not have stories for these pitches. I do not at all, because again, I have not read a majority of the Wildstorm comics. I was very much going into this blind. I did research on them, and every time I looked up their stories, I was just thinking, this is a little too complicated, but I'm sticking with this universe because I think it fits, especially with the idea of this is the multiverse, and this is a universe that has not been touched by the DCU, and it's completely different from what is happening in the DCCU, so I just wanted to make it different and keep Wildstorm. So yeah, I just have generalized ideas like, hey, this movie is now this, here's the roster for this team, and here are the villains that they're going up against. And you can sort of, if you want to, you can put your own plot to these ideas, especially with the putting together like, oh, this first one would have came out in the year 2000, so you can work with that what you will. So for the first movie to be the analog for X-Men, I chose the comic book WildC.A.T.S. WildC.A.T.S was, I believe, their premier comic in Wildstorm, with a lot of the main plot lines going through there, outside of, I want to say, Stormwatch and the Authority. WildC.A.T.S was sort of the main anchor of that universe at the time, and I thought that WildC.A.T.S would be a good great decision to have be sort of the main through line movie series for this comic, for this universe. And for the members of the Wildcats, I'm making the roster smaller than how it is in the actual comics when they first debuted. So for the team, it is Jacob Marlowe, who is Lord Emp, Mr. Majestic, who wasn't really a member of the Wildcats team until later and then just wasn't a full-fledged member. I wanted to put him as a member of the Wildcats this time because when you're looking at the comics, you're looking at him as sort of like, oh, this is sort of the main hero, you could sort of say, of the universe, and he feels like a heroic major character. And I say that because I very much am putting him in that Cyclops position as like the leader of the Wildcats and being that heroic character. And so that's sort of why he is there. And then the other three members of this team are Spartan, Zealot, and Voodoo. And Spartan is the character I'm looking at to be sort of my Wolverine character, sort of the main character of this entire Fox universe. And that's sort of how I'm looking at Spartan. And the main antagonist of this film would be the Cabal, led by Lord Hellespont, with members of Pike, Providence, and Devon. And Lord Hellespont would very much serve the Magneto position in the film and be the leader of this Cabal, for lack of a better term. And yeah, that's sort of the basic idea of the first one of Wildcats. Next up is X2 X-Men United. For this one, I did Wildcats, but replacing the S with a 2 because I want it to be cheeky, and that's what I did. So that would be the next entry. And for the characters that were on the team, Jacob Marlowe, Lord Emp would return, Mr. Majestic, Spartan, Zealot, Voodoo would return, and then we would add the new members of Warblade and Maul. And those are two characters that were very prominent in Wildcats, and I wanted to go ahead and put them in the team. I also want to state right now, a character that you will not see in the Wildcats films is Grifter, because I have plans for Grifter somewhere else. Again, I have reasons for everything I'm doing. Grifter is a character that I'm saving for something else. And the Cabal of Lord Hellespont and Providence would return. Hightower I would sort of introduce as a member of the Wildcats, similar to Pyro, and then he just joined the Cabal. But the main antagonist would be Ben Santini, who would be the leader of a mercenary organization called Black Razors, trying to take out the Wildcats, and that's sort of where they would come from, and that sort of would be the basic villain story point against the heroes. And yeah, that's Wildcats 2. And next up is X-Men The Last Stand, and for this one I did Wildcats Vicious Circles because I didn't want to just call it Wildcats The Last Stand because I didn't like that. And so I just looked through the comics and I saw a title that I was like, oh, that's a good title. I'm going to put it here, even if it doesn't match the story at all. Similar to how the MCU does occasionally, and how some other movies do as well. For the team, we would get Jacob Marlowe, Lord Emp, Mr. Majestic, Spartan, Zealot, Voodoo, Warblade, and Maul would all return. But then we would also see the introduction of sort of like the next generation of Wildcats, which would be Backlash, who would be sort of the daughter of the original Backlash, and we would have something for him in the future. Savant and Nemesis. Those would sort of be the newer members of the Wildcats. And the main antagonist would be the Cabal, again, Lord Hellespont being the main antagonist with Providence and Hightower on his team, but also they would be joined by Coda Sisterhood, which is a group of warrior women who I believe Zealot was a part of that organization, but then left, and so this is sort of their Coda Sisterhood, very much their introduction to this universe, and they would be working with the Cabal, and that would sort of be the original trilogy right there, the main focus of the original trilogy being Wildcats. And then we move on to the X-Men Origins Wolverine. I'm moving over to the Wolverine trilogy now. X-Men Origins Wolverine, which would be Wildcats Origins Spartan. I'm just making it simple for me in terms of the title. And Spartan would be the main character, main protagonist, and we would sort of look more of a backstory, because when I was researching Spartan, I saw that he had a rich backstory going all the way back to the 40s and the 30s and all that. And so this would sort of take place around that time, where the main antagonists of the film would be Slaughterhouse Smith and Miles Craven. Slaughterhouse Smith being a very prominent mobster at the time, and Miles Craven sort of being the person in charge of the IO. The International Operations, I believe that's what it's called in Wildstorm, where that's sort of an organization that's controlling a majority of the stuff. They're both evil and good because there are good guys that are working for it, but also Miles Craven is one of the main antagonists of the Wildstorm universe from what I gathered from my research, and he's sort of in charge of that. So you can take however you want to use that with a grain of salt. But yeah, that would sort of basically be the basics of Wildcat's origin, Spartan. And then we move on to the Wolverine analog, which would be the Spartan. And Spartan would return again, main protagonist. One of the main antagonists of the film would be Kaizen Gamora, and he would sort of be the person we would look at as like, oh, this guy's the main antagonist. But the actual main antagonist, and by the way, this is a time jump from Wildcat's origins to now, the actual main antagonist would be the character of John Colt, aka Kaizen Gamora II. And this version of John Colt is an android, and it's because Spartan at one point went by the name of John Colt, and this was an android that was created, and he turned antagonistic in the comics, and so I wanted to sort of go in that direction and go, hey, this is an android version of Spartan who's actually the main antagonist of this entire thing, sort of doing the twist that the Wolverine did, where we think the grandfather is dead, but actually the grandfather's the Silver Samurai and the main antagonist the entire time. That's sort of the direction I would go for that if I could fully plot out a good movie for it. But again, I don't know these characters well enough to actually give a good story for it. And the final movie of the Wolverine, the Spartan trilogy, would be Logan, and for it would be called Jan Cole. And Jan Cole is sort of his actual name outside of the John Colt name that he gave himself. And the main characters of that would be Spartan and the Golden. The Golden are 3 children characters who the Spartans saved at one point, and then they became superpowered and became superhumans and became superheroes. And so I just wanted to incorporate that, similar to how Laura Kinney was in Logan. And so that's sort of the direction I'm going for that. And the main antagonist of the film would be Samuel Smith. And Samuel Smith in the comics is the grandson of Slaughterhouse Smith. Due to the separation of time, we could still keep grandson, but it would probably be great-grandson or great-great-grandson. And so Samuel Smith is just trying to get revenge and trying to kill the Spartan. And that would sort of be the direction of that film. And yeah, that's the Spartan trilogy. And now we move on to the prequel saga, which would be, First Class, Days of Future Past, Apocalypse, and Dark Phoenix. And for X-Men First Class, I chose Team 7. And Team 7 is very much at the time a Vietnam era team of soldiers that would go out and do missions. And I'm excluding Grifter again for this team because I want to save Grifter for their own thing over there. And so for Team 7, I'm not going to list off the members. Team 7 is Team 7, excluding some people, but also Backlash's father. Like, Backlash was a part of the third WildCats movie, and she was a team of Wildcats. Her father would be in this movie, and there would be a lot of characters that we would get references to. It's like, oh, that was my daughter in the future, and this is the father of that daughter now. But yeah, I know I just made it sound complicated. But anyway, the main antagonist of this Team 7 movie would be General Rostov, who was the main antagonist of the first miniseries, or one of the main antagonists of the first miniseries for Team 7. Miles Craven was another major antagonist for Team 7. However, I didn't want to reuse Miles Craven, so that's very much why I'm putting Rostov in that position instead. And so Team 7 versus General Rostov, that's the story. Moving on to the next one, which is X-Men Days of Future Past. And instead of X-Men Days of Future Past, it would be Team 7 Objective Hell. Team 7 being the main team and the main characters in this. And this is sort of where I decided, you know what, X-Men was willing to do this, I'll do it as well. And I just took villains from other characters and other teams and just made them the antagonists of the Team 7 films. And so the main antagonist of Team 7 Objective Hell would be Lord Entropy. And I looked him up and I saw he only was around for 2 issues of the Wildcat series. So I was like, you know what, I'm just going to use him here. He was only around for 2 issues. We can make him seem like a grander threat in this film, and that's sort of the direction I'm going, is making him seem like a grander threat and having Team 7 having to go up against Lord Entropy. And then we move on to the next one, which is X-Men Apocalypse, and for X-Men Apocalypse, I made it Team 7 Dead Reckoning. And all of these names that I'm using are the titles of miniseries that Team 7 had. And the main antagonist of this film would be Tapestry, who is a character that was introduced with Wildcats, but I never used her in the Wildcats movie, so I'm putting her in the Team 7 movies to sort of show like, oh, this is a big threat for Team 7, and she's someone that she's a force to be reckoned with, and I think Tapestry could do a really great job serving as this antagonistic force for Team 7, and that's the Team 7 trilogy. And I say Team 7 trilogy because for Dark Phoenix, I'm choosing to rename it Wetworks. And in Wetworks, one of the main characters of Team 7, I believe his name is Dane, would create this team. He would be the leader of the team, and he put together this new team, and they would sort of be the next gen of, for lack of a better term, of Team 7, and the main antagonist of Wetworks would be Night Tribes. And yeah, that's basically what the Dark Phoenix movie would be, Wetworks, and it would also be set before the Wildcats films. And now we move on to the next edition, which is the New Mutants, which for the New Mutants, I did Gen 13 when I was originally, now full transparency, when I was originally doing this idea, originally Gen 13 were going to be my X-Men analogs. However, when I did more research on the Wildstorm universe, I was like, actually it makes more sense to have Gen 13 fit the New Mutants position and have Wildcats fit in the X-Men movie positions, and so that's why Gen 13 is at the New Mutants. The members of Gen 13 would be Caitlin Fairchild, Bobby Lane, Eddie Chung, Roxy Spalding, and Sarah Rainmaker. They would sort of be the main characters of this film, and the main antagonist would be Ivana Bayol, who was the main antagonist of sort of like the first arc that Gen 13 had, and sort of like how in New Mutants, where the Demon Bear arc was the plot of that film, imagine the plot of this film would be the first arc of Gen 13 in the comics, and that's sort of the direction I would go for this one. And yeah, that's it for the New Mutants, and now we move over to the one I've been holding back on, the one I've been telling you all to be patient. If you're fans of the Wildstorm comics, be patient, and that is the Deadpool movies. And for Deadpool, I did Grifter, and the reason why I did Grifter was because whenever I was reading the New 52 comics, DC really wanted to make Grifter one of the main characters of the entire, of like their universe, wanted to make him one of the big main characters of that universe. And I was thinking, well, this is sort of how Marvel is doing occasionally with Deadpool, so I'll just make Grifter Deadpool. I'll make him that character, and I think Grifter would fit perfectly in that role as well, especially with his look. I think you can very much look at him and be like, ah yes, that is a Deadpool-esque character. And yeah, Colt Cash, Grifter, the main character, and the main antagonists of the first Grifter movie would be Andromeda and Hans Arp, who would sort of the main antagonists of Grifter's one-shot comic back in the 90s, and so sort of taking that story as the basis and trying to flesh out that story a bit more to be the plot of the first film. And yeah, that's the first film, and then we move on to Deadpool 2, which is Grifter 2. And Grifter would return, we'd see returning characters, maybe Maul and Warblade would be in it, and they would be sort of supporting characters for Grifter, but the main antagonist of the film would be Lord Defile, another major antagonist for the Wildstorm universe. And the reason why I wanted Lord Defile, this massive antagonist in the Wildstorm universe, to be the main antagonist of Grifter 2 is because I didn't know any more Grifter villains. I did some research, and I'm like, I feel like I've used the majority of them in some of my ideas and for this stuff, and I was just thinking, Lord Defile is a character that sounds cool. Also, having this massive threat be sort of the main antagonist of the second film, I think would be fun. Also, again, we're making these comedy movies because the Deadpool movies are comedies, and so yeah, Grifter being able to make jokes about Lord Defile, this massive antagonist being the main antagonist of his film, I think that would be hilarious. But yeah, that's that is the What If the X-Men movies for DC Films. Better yet, the title of this video could have been just called What If the X-Men Movies or Wildstorm Universe. And yeah, and again, I understand if this title may be misleading because you're probably expecting DC superheroes like Superman, Batman, maybe Green Lantern or Doom Patrol or characters like that, but I'm very much still working in the universe that I have created in the What If the MCU was the DCCU, and those characters have already been made, and so this is something that is connected to that. And also, because I did this, and Deadpool and Wolverine is in Phase 5 of the MCU, you can sort of guess what my Deadpool and Wolverine analog is in my DCCU Phase 5. And I'll just tell you, it's Grifter and Spartan. That's the movie. That's the movie. This is that video. I understand if this may be a little bit of a lackluster video, but this was one of the hard ones for me to do. This was a very difficult idea for me to do. It was requested once, and I was like, all right, I'll do it. And then also thinking, well, I was gonna have to do it anyway because I needed to make sense of what was happening with the Fox universe as the MCU was going on, and this is very much what was happening. So yeah, what were your thoughts on the ideas? Did you like them? Did you hate them? Were you indifferent to them? Whatever your thoughts, post them in the comments down below. Also, again, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you want to be up to date with all the videos I have here on the channel. Also, hit the notification bell. That way you can be notified whenever a new video like this comes your way. Also, please, in the comments, give me suggestions on what you would like me to pitch. Like, what are some ideas? Like, hey, do this idea, do that idea. Like, hey, I'm suggesting you do this because I'm slowly running low on those comment suggestions that I had months ago. So yeah, please make sure to hit the comments. That way you can give me ideas of what you want me to do. But again, thank you all so much, and I hope you all remember to have a great rest of the day.